Hello lovely people, Thyworm here with a build guide for last Epoch patch 0.9. It is my first build guide for patch, so this is the Zookeeper 2.0 version, the new iteration of an old build that I made. Not much changed honestly, but people have been asking about this one quite a bit. All useful links are in the description as well. This is a character which is my take on a zoo build. It has a lot of companions, critting for a decent amount of damage. It's fairly tanky. I completed around 167 plus corruption with ease and cleared tier 3 dungeons. With better gear you can do even better, although tier 4 dungeons may be a stretch. I'm not entirely sure why you want to run those things in the first place, but hey, that's just me. This is my honest build guide on this character, something fun to play, so let's look at the pros and cons. Here are the pros. It is just a very smooth playstyle. It's fun if you like minions. You're participating in the fights as well, making this a more active summoner. It does decent damage in endgame and it skills pretty well with a lot of stats, and you can autocast everything if you want and you have the mana. Then the cons, it is not very fast, so it is not the best mapper in that sense. It doesn't have a movement ability, which, you know, is a bit of a controversial topic I guess, but it doesn't. And it's fairly slow while leveling as well. This build takes a bit of time to ramp up, but once it does, it is once again very smooth. Let's start with the build requirements. This is my first character since last Epoch went online, so my stash was empty. In terms of unique items, you would like to have the Claw or the Fang amulet to summon wolves up to the companion limit, and Artor's Legacy for +1 companion. Both of those uniques have good drop rates, although I didn't find the higher version one just yet. Eteros Path are great boots to use if you want to, but it's not mandatory. And that's it. I kept it simple, and of course I still need to find a heap of uniques myself. Then the build philosophy. My build philosophy in general is just that I want to play fun builds. I don't have endgame requirements per se. I'm not too aware of the meta honestly right now. This build to me is just fun. It has a bunch of minions, it has an active playstyle Beastmaster, and it does very well, even though my gear is still quite bad. Just don't expect this build to compete with S-tier McFluffin builds out there. It won't. But if you like what you see, then give it a go. So what do you need in terms of stats? Here is the wish list. In terms of defenses, make sure you get res capped of course and get 100% crit avoidance. Early on you can use the Woven Flesh for easy crit avoidance. The blessings in the Monolith can help a lot here too, as well as idols. Furthermore, you want health, some leech and some minion health so they don't die. Mana and mana regen are useful too for autocasting. In terms of offense, we're scaling flat added crit damage from minions, that is an affix on a chest and idols, then crit chance and crit multi from minions, with the goal of making them crit 100% of the time and do a lot of multiplicative damage. We take some more armor shred on the tree, that is always solid, and that's really about it. Attack speed, by the way, also pretty good, both for you and your minions. Let's look at the skill specialization and the skills that we're using. I will not discuss each point invested, but instead focus on the more important nodes. You can see everything in the build planner for yourself. Let's start with Summon Wolf. If you don't have the unique amulet, the Claw or the Fang just yet, you need to take safety in numbers, as this allows you to summon wolves up to your companion limit. That limit should be 6, unless there's a new unique out there I don't know about. Then we travel to the opposite direction, picking pack hunters for +1 companion and +1 wolf. And then we set up the howling of the wolves, providing the wolves, other companions and us with buffs. You take Snarl, Call of the Wind and Battle Cry and you max those out. If you manage to get more than 20 points, which I don't have, Howl of Might is a good node and Savage Hunters as well for just more damage. Up next, Swipe, our own attack. This serves as a tool to leech, get mana back for our companion abilities, and it has Culling Strike as well. Duality of Nature turns Swipe into a mana battery, which is pretty good. Culling gives you 14% Culling Strike. Then we take Aspect of the Panther with Feline Hunter for the attack speed and Lion's Strength for added melee damage. That is not for us, but for the bear, which uses Swipe and uses this skill tree. More on that in a bit. And finally, 3 out of 3 Wild Calling. I think this is a new or reworked node, and it gives you 45% chance to call forth Spirit Wolves out of your own wolves. You have 4 wolves, they do 1800 tooltip DPS, they can crit as well, so it helps in terms of damage, but mostly it looks cool, and that is important too. Then let's go into summon Raptor, one of our big hitting companions. I'm making some questionable choices maybe, but hey, feel free to make your own decisions of course. I first went into Scent of Blood, giving Raptors more damage against bleeding targets, and then Ravage for the crit. I'm only taking 4 out of 5 Razor Wings, which could be a mistake, you know, more flat damage, but okay. Then I path left to Thrill of the Hunt for haste and adaptation, making your Raptor larger and deal more damage after he kills 10 enemies. He typically does that pretty fast on the Monolith. This node is useless on most bosses, but how often do you really fight bosses? Not that often, so I think this is a decent node while mapping. Then another set of questionable choices with 2 out of 2 Cornered and Broken Tooth. The idea here is that the Raptor hurts itself, and with missing health it deals more damage. This is good on bosses where companions typically take damage from AoE, so I kept it in. You can replace this for something else too. This setup does mean, also for the bear in a bit, that we need to make the enemies bleed. The Raptor does that, the bear does that too, but I tend to get a little bit of bleed chance on gear or idols just to help out. Summon Bear is our other hard hitter. I first took the crit nodes with Primal Precision and Unstoppable Force. You may not even need full points in Primal Precision, just test that on a dummy. Then more Bleed Synergy with Lacerating Claws for more damage and bleed chance, plus Wounded Prey for more damage against bleeding targets, 1% for every bleed stack up to 30%. This is very reliable, 30% more damage because our companions have a lot of attack speed and apply a lot of bleed stacks. I rounded out with Swipe and Vicious Strikes. The thing about Swipe here is that it scales with its own stats, but it uses the Swipe tree. After a bit of testing, it seems like he uses the entire tree. The culling at 14% definitely works, you can see that over here in the boss fight. And I'm pretty sure the other stats work as well, although it's kind of hard to figure out exactly if that is the case. If you know more about this, feel free to put it in the comments, but for now I'm pretty much convinced that the entire tree does indeed apply to the bear. Finally, Frenzy Totem. This buffs our companions further and makes them crit 100% of the time, except maybe the wolves. First, we set up the crit synergy with 3 out of 3 Rabidity for buff effect, Bestial Frenzy for flat damage, and Lead the Pack for 250% increased crit chance when our wolves howl. As we have 4 wolves and they have a ton of attack speed and their howl can proc on attack, plus we autocast it, that means howl has a very high uptime. And so this 250% crit is active most of the time, especially on bosses where it matters most. This synergy works super well. We're traveling south to Symbol of Selflessness because I don't need that frenzy buff myself, but my companions do, plus it's an additional 30% buff effect, which is pretty good. I'm rounding it out with Reckless Frenzy, but once again it's hard to know if this then also applies to your companions. In my mind it should, but I'm not 100% sure it does. Time to look at the passives. When I was leveling, I mostly took damage nodes, but now that we're doing higher corruption timelines, I swapped around a bit and opted for more health instead. You are seeing my level 96 passive tree here. Gift of the Wilderness and Hunter's Restoration just help you stay alive. Survival of the Pack with the Leech is good sustain. In the Beastmaster tree there is a lot that I'm taking. Apart from generic nodes that are just very good for companions, there are a few specific choices I am making. The first is Boarheart and Porcine Constitution, the tried and true defensive nodes which have you take less percent damage, 30% effect when the buff is up, and it's up a lot. We take the aspect of the Shark, specifically the Lamprey Teeth for Leech, the Rending Maw for Armor Shred, and Hunters of the Deep to grant the buff 10% attack speed and 75% damage to companions, plus that Armor Shred that helps too. Further right, we take Ocean Maw, increasing the effect by 120%, which should mean 165% damage and 22% attack speed for minions. Our final aspect is that of the Lynx. Serrated Claws gives 60% crit multiplier, which is pretty big. The other nodes here are just more strength scaling, companion stats and health. Then also very important, gear. I already told you about the uniques. There is currently an issue with uploading builds into any build planner because Last Epoch is now online and the characters aren't saved locally anymore. So I can't upload my save file because there is no save file, at least not on my PC. I'm just going to hover over my gear instead, so you can see what is going on here, and you can laugh a bit at how bad the gear still is. I could do a lot to improve this, like play the game more, but the character is already doing fine. I have started new characters, which I will tell you about soon, and if I'm able to do 150, 170 plus corruption rather easily with this build plus this gear and tier 3 dungeons, I'm sure that with more investment, this build goes a long way. It's already pretty decent and it could scale up much more. Notable gear here is the chest with a nicely rolled plus added crit chance from minions, which is super important to reach 100% crit chance for your companions. The Dragon Bone Axe is a nice base item here with flat minion damage, tier 6 as well. Otherwise it is minion stats, health, strength, and that's pretty much it. Plus level and skills helps too of course, but you can see I don't have many of those. For idols once more I'm taking plus added crit chance from minions, resistances and some crit avoidance. Minion melee attack speed is also good because that applies more bleed stacks, more armor shred and more howling, but just fill out the idols to your own needs. For blessing, same idea really. I'm taking all the resistance blessings because I don't want to deal with resistances. It's really nothing special. You'll get these by naturally progressing through the monolith, and as you get more you can replace your gear as you go. I created a loot filter specifically for you for this build. I used this thing myself from the start. I leveled all the way to level 96 using this filter. Let me walk you through it. I recolored idols for you with affixes you want. I made flashy green all the affixes that give you levels for skills you are using, plus some really good affixes otherwise. The loot filter shows normal items until level 10. It hides all non-primalist gear except uniques, set items and exalted items, and it shows other classes tier 4 plus class affixes, so you can shard those if you want. Those are grey. And then there are more colors for all your other loot, starting at the bottom with yellow and gradually getting stricter all the way up to purple. At some point I put a level cap on most of these rules, so yellow items show up until I think it's level 38 and then they don't show up anymore. It should be smooth sailing. You can also enable more rules hiding certain low level base items, making the filter even stricter. Here's the build in action. First some dummy gameplay with damage numbers. You can see some crits here are well over 140k, but more than that it's just so many attacks. For bosses especially, this build is very smooth because the minions focus a single target and they get easily up to 200 plus armor shredding stacks, 40 plus bleed stacks. I'm applying frailty and chill here and they crit all the time, making most bosses a piece of cake, also on higher corruption. You can participate in boss fights, but your minions take care of business too, so you can focus on the mechanics. And then here's some mapping and bossing footage. It's just for me very fun to play, kind of no nonsense, not the fastest, not the slowest, but the damage output is more than decent. You're pretty tanky as well, and there's a lot of room for improvement. I typically play without damage numbers these days. It's very distracting, you can't see boss mechanics anymore with this many minion attacks. But you saw the dummy, so you know, it's all good. Talking about leveling for a bit, I'm trying to make an honest guide here and I'll tell you it's pretty slow. Primalist in general I feel levels rather slow, but what I do like about this build is that it works from level 1. You pick wolves, you pick swipe and slowly grow the zoo animals until you're full build. It's a very linear sort of gradual progression, but you know, there will be times that minions are squishy and that just happens. Don't forget minions scale with your level, so they get stronger and tankier as you level up. Also, you give them some health and they shouldn't die anymore unless you do 300 plus corruption or abyss and he summons that meteor stone that slowly descends. Yeah, that stuff's gonna kill you, but otherwise you're completely solid. You can see it also here in the Formosa's fight. These guys are just standing in the boss's AoE in the attack and it doesn't matter to them because they got their leech going and they got a lot of health. Let's talk some Monolith Modifiers. I would avoid crit avoidance if you can, as this is a 100% crit build and, you know, doesn't really work with crit avoidance. Without crit, your damage is severely hampered. I would also take mostly defensive modifiers and not damage. You are not the tankiest character out there, but you do deal a ton of damage, or well, your minions do. So making enemies tankier is preferred and much safer than giving them, let's say, 200% damage. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this guide. I spent a good chunk of time on these guides, which is why I don't release too many of them. If you appreciate the effort, consider liking or subscribing. It really helps me out. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Love you all. Bye bye.